Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today we're going to talk about my May and June highs and lows. So this is going to look a little bit different than my typical high and low video. I usually will talk through what I liked about my highs, my ratings, talk through the synopsis, and I do the same thing with my lows. However, I just released my mid-year freakout tag, and in that tag I talked a lot about the books that were on my highs, and trying to not talk about the same books every single time I talk to you guys, I'm going to do something a little bit different. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go through my highs and lows, alternating back and forth, but when I get to a high, I will give you a very brief synopsis, and then I'm going to tell you a book that I'm adding to my TBR based on my enjoyment of that high book. Some of these additions to my TBR have direct correlations to the book, but many of them are just a general concept, a genre, something that I had on my physical TBR that kind of went along with something or themes in one of the books that I enjoyed. So you'll get a little bit of a TBR here along with books that I enjoyed, and then I'll still talk to you guys about the books that I did not enjoy and why I didn't enjoy them. We will start on a high note, which is a book I read back in May, and that is The Children on the Hill. I rated this 5 stars. I've talked about this a lot on my channel. This is a Frankenstein-inspired story that has a dual timeline where you have some children who live with their grandparents and their grandma brings home a mysterious kid. And then you also have one of the children, as they've grown up, is a monster hunter and is receiving messages from someone indicating that these girls are going missing and they have to solve that mystery, and the storylines converge. So I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the monster aspect of this book. The kids focus on, they write like their monster hunting book when they're little, and that book is inserted throughout the book. You get like little excerpts from their novel that they made when they were children, which I thought was a really fun component of the story. And being that this is in the horror genre, I wanted to stay in that same genre. And so for my TBR, I am adding The Call of Cthulhu and Other Stories. This is an H.P. Lovecraft book, and I recently, in my physical TBR, got the H.P. Lovecraft collection. I've never read any H.P. Lovecraft, and I know that a lot of horror novels are inspired by his books, especially The Call of Cthulhu. Hopefully it'll focus on this, yes. So I believe that some of the monsters in World of Warcraft were based on some of Lovecraft's work, and I know that there is just a ton of modern horror novels that take a Lovecraftian approach to their stories, and so I want to know where that reference comes from, so that's why I'm adding this one to my TBR. I really don't know much about the story, and anytime I look up like a synopsis, if I just want a brief synopsis, I really just get information about H.P. Lovecraft, and so I'm gonna go in blind, and I hope that I enjoy it. So the first low is All of Our Demise, which is the second book in, and I believe the last book in the All of Us Villains series. I'll put up the first book so you guys know the series that I'm talking about. So All of Our Demise is a continuation of the first book. So I'm not going to tell you much about the plot of the second book, but the first book you have children who are raised in a city where think Hunger Games, but think Hunger Games where all of the children who are entered into the tournament have, one, they have magic, and two, they are raised to be kind of evil people who don't care about the well-being of others. The tournament is to gain control over what is called high magic, and there is, I think, 7 families, if I remember correctly, in the book that battle for control over the high magic, and if they win the tournament, or if their kid wins the tournament, then they get the high magic for the next 20 years, I think is how it goes, and everybody else dies. So the first book I thought was okay. I enjoyed the concept of it. It was, I believe this is a YA series, and so I think that that's some of the disconnect that I had with the series. I really wanted them to go further with the villainous capacity of these characters. So that is something I was a little disappointed with in the series, that it doesn't really go super dark, and I think that that's because of the YA aspect of it. I do think the second book had some elements of going darker, but it still wasn't enough for me. And some of the, I don't want to spoil it, so some of the choices that were made with the characters, I just don't think would have been made. I also think that some of the interesting timelines and what could have happened were cut off very short in the book. And so I became very frustrated because I was like, there's no way that this can end in a way that I want it to end. And yeah, so I think that you knew at a certain point what was going to happen, and it wasn't what I wanted to happen in this type of story. And so I did finish this. I ended up rating this 2 stars. I think the start of the book was closer to a 3.5 star for me, but as the book continued and it just kind of dragged on and I knew it was going to happen, I just became more and more frustrated with the book. Next, on a better note, is the Tropic of Serpents. So I've talked about this book on the Mid-Year Freakout tag as my best sequel that I read this year. I absolutely love the Lady Trent memoirs, which is what the series is. So this is book 2. I believe the series has 5 books, maybe 6 books. In the original series, there's not a knockoff, but like a spin-off series where you follow Lady Trent's granddaughter, I believe, and I'm not including those in this series, but I'll put it up on the screen so you guys know how many books are in the series. But it's a series about a dragon hunter, Lady Trent, who is in kind of an era where women are supposed to be very docile and stay at home and stay out of trouble, and she wants none of it. She wants to document dragons and figure out how they live and where they live. And did I say dragon hunter? Sorry, she's not a dragon hunter. She's a dragon studier. She studies dragons and is creating this history. And these books are written as her memoir of how she's become this like renowned scientific mind on dragons. So this book I rated 5 stars, and the book that I'm adding to my TBR due to this is Miss Perry's Pocket Guide to Caring and Feeding for British Dragons. I think it's a really long title. I'll put up the picture off to the side. And to be honest, I know absolutely nothing about the synopsis of this book. I just know that, well, that's not true. I think I read like the first couple of sentences, and there are baby dragons. There are people who are trying to take care of them, and you read this story of these people trying to care for them. So I think it's going to be kind of cozy fantasy, and once again, dragons, and that's kind of the connection between the Tropic of Serpents and as well as the cozy vibes. I really enjoy that kind of peaceful story. There's still some dramatic things happening and some high stakes things happening, but the overlying feel of the story is very cozy and warm, and so that's what I want from this. So we'll see how it goes. The next low is the Final Strife, which I actually have this like really beautiful illustrated and signed edition of the Final Strife that I got for super cheap at a used bookstore. And so I bought it because it was cheap and I knew I had wanted to read it, and unfortunately I did not enjoy it. This book I actually DNF'd, and I just think the writing style wasn't for me, but as well as I was getting really frustrated with the fact that they weren't focusing on one of the characters I really wanted to learn about. So if you've never heard of this series, you have an empire that is built on a caste system of sorts. The 3 different blood types are red blood, blue blood, and clear blood. The clear bloods, I believe, are known as like the lowest on the caste system, then the blue bloods, and then the red bloods are like the elite. The reason I say I believe the clear bloods are lowest on the totem pole is because of how they're treated by everyone, but I believe the blue bloods and the clear bloods are almost on the same level. The clear bloods are trusted, I guess, to be servants of the elite class, and the blue bloods are not, because the blue bloods have revolted in the past. Well, actually both of them have, but I think the blue bloods are a little bit more mouthy about it. The clear bloods have had in the past a revolution as well, and it's caused them to really be beaten down. So every clearblood that is born has their hands taken. So they cut off their hands and they cut out their tongues, and that's kind of how they keep that class in its place. And so I really enjoyed their character and their there's a little girl that you follow in this that is a clearblood, and how they still make life work for them, and they still have community. They can still communicate with each other. They persevere even through this hardship, more than a hardship. But I thought that character and her life was so interesting, but we hardly ever got to see her. We focused on the other two. So you have I don't even know if I want to go into that because that's kind of spoilers. You have these other two girls that you're focusing on as well in this book. One is a blue blood and one is a red blood, and they are, we'll just say that they're training for this competition, which can help them get into this government position to then help with the ruling class and change laws and things like that. And so I thought that the premise of the book is really interesting. I just didn't like the characters. Like I said, the clear-blooded character, I can't remember their names because I read this a little bit ago, but I really enjoyed her side of things. I enjoyed her personality. I enjoyed the community. I enjoyed just her storyline in general. But the red blood and the blue blood were, I don't know, just annoying and arrogant, and I don't know, they just weren't very likable, and I don't think they're meant to be. But it was really hard when we were focused in on those two characters and we have something really interesting happening over here, but we're not allowed to go into that world. And so, yeah, I just think that this wasn't for me. I think that there's absolutely an audience for this book. I think the second book came out this year, which is one of the reasons I picked this up. And so I know a lot of people have loved it, but the writing style and how we were focusing on each of the characters, yeah, I just didn't enjoy. The next book is one that I loved, and that was Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. I've talked about this a ton on my channel. So this is a book about Emily Wilde, who is making an encyclopedia of fairies, and she's documenting the different types of fairies in her world. She travels to a very cold, small village where she is studying the hidden ones that currently do not have any documentation about them. And so you kind of follow her journey, and she is, well, that's all I'll say because like I said, I've talked about this a lot. So this is just a very cozy story, and I kind of wanted to continue on reading in a cozy atmosphere, but also about fairies. And so I am adding the Fairy Bargains of Prospect Hill onto my TBR. The first reason I'm adding this to my TBR is because of a quote by H.G. Perry praising the book, and H.G. Perry is the author of The Magician's Daughter, which I dearly love, and so it intrigued me. And then as I read the synopsis, this also talks about how we're focused on two sisters, I believe, in this story, and it's promoted as a cozy fantasy, and so I was like, more intrigued. And then the sisters have to deal with bargaining with the Fae. So I believe Prospect Hill, which is where they live, does not have any magic, and I think they are farmers or live on a farm, and they have to figure out how to bargain, or they have figured out how to bargain with the Fae to get what they need. And then there are some things that happen that they didn't intend on, and the story commences from there. So I'm interested about this like bargaining aspect of the Fae. It sounds very, if you've listened to any of my other videos where I talk about the goblin market, I really enjoy the like bargaining and small trade feature of those types of magical creatures. And so, yeah, I just think that this is going to be a really fun read. The next low was Something is Killing the Children, which is a horror graphic novel about a town where children are going missing, and a stranger wanders into the town and tells them essentially that she knows what's going on and that she's their only hope. And this, I really wanted to like this. I ended up rating this a 2.5 or a 2. I think it was a 2.5. The storyline itself, or the premise, I thought was really interesting, but unfortunately it ended up doing a lot of the things. It just all seemed very unoriginal, which that sounds really harsh. But I just felt like I haven't read a lot of horror, and some of the things that were happening were very predictable. And so that was disappointing. And then I also think that the writing style of the graphic novel itself made the characters, especially the character who comes into the town to save them, very dramatic. If you guys have ever listened to like superhero stories, like especially YA superhero stories, where they're like, I'm gonna get you, and you know, you'll pay for this, like those types of quotes, that's what this felt like when I was reading it. And so yeah, it just wasn't for me. I won't be continuing on with the series, but you know, you win some, you lose some. The last high for this video is Paladin's Strength, which is by T. Kingfisher. This is the second book in the Saints of Steel series, and I just absolutely love this book. It's 5-star. If I didn't say, or if I missed any of the readings on any of the other books, all of these highs are 5 stars. I just really enjoyed all of them. But Paladin's Strength, you follow 2 new characters in this fantasy world where some nefarious things are happening. There are decapitations and kind of a mystery going on in the background, and you follow, it's a fantasy romance / horror elements. It's this book, the second book in the series, Paladin's Strength, was a lot darker than Paladin's Grace, although both of them do have horror elements, but I think it got a little bit more intense in the second book. But you end up following a paladin in both books of the Saint of Steel, and the paladin's god has died, and so they have to kind of deal with the repercussions of that. And then you follow a love interest in each book, and then they somehow journey together, and you find out more about the world through their relationship forming and other events happening in the world. So that's all I'll give you as far as that goes. I can link some videos if you want more explanation of Paladin's Strength or any of the books that I've mentioned. I'll link them in the description below. The book that I'm adding to my TBR based on Paladin's Strength is The Theft of Swords. So one of the things I really enjoyed about Paladin's Strength was the journey aspect, the fact that these people are moving across a land and you're seeing events happen as that happens. And the Theft of Swords is talking about a skilled thief and his mercenary partner who have made a profitable living carrying out dangerous assignments for conspiring nobles until they're hired to pilfer a famed sword. And so I think it's going to be another journey novel. I think, obviously this is not a romance, but I do, for whatever reason, get kind of gritty vibes from this. And I really enjoyed that aspect of Paladin's Strength as well. The world that they were in was very gritty and very downtrodden. And so I'm interested to get to this. I've also heard like excellent things about Michael Sullivan, who is the author of these novels. And I think this is this is multiple books in one, even though it just says one. But if I can find information, once again, I'll put it up on the screen so you guys can know. But this is the first in a series, and I think there's 2 books, but I think that originally this was 2 or 3 separate books, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm excited to finally get to this, and another one of my physical TBR books that I haven't read that I am going to finally get to. I apologize if the camera angle has moved. I realized while editing that I completely forgot one of my lows, and so I just had to come in and tell you guys because it was my most recent, and I think it's a really popular book right now, and I just wanted to give my opinions. So the last low for this video is The Last Heir to the Blackwood Library. So this book is about a girl who is kind of down on her luck, and her family has had some hardships. Her parents have died. Her brother has been sent off to war and ended up dying while in combat, and she has kind of had to make her own way as a woman in, this is historical fiction, so kind of around, it was in London or around London. And so she has a very difficult life. And so you start out with her going to see the solicitor who has sent for her, and she finds out that she is the last remaining heir of the Blackwood family that lives at Blackwood or is it Blackwood family? I can't remember what the name of the family was, but it is a family who owns this Blackwood Abbey, which is where Blackwood Library exists. And so she ends up inheriting, but one of the stipulations of her inheritance is that she has to live in Blackwood Abbey. And so she goes there, and automatically she knows that things aren't quite right. Some weird things start happening, dark things are happening, creepy atmosphere from the Abbey itself. She's very lonely. The staff there kind of treats her not poorly, but they treat her as an outsider, and she is not really, she's used to kind of being able to do what she wants, and because of the fact that she's inherited this title along with this abbey, she has felt very separated from the world that she came from, and she doesn't really know that she fits in with the new one. And so you follow her and this library, and she loves books. She always has. She's never really been able to read as much as she wants to because of the fact that she hasn't really had the privilege to have access to books. And so having this library at her beck and call kind of becomes, the perfect storm for her. She really, loves reading. And so, but then she notices that every time she goes in this library, she gets a headache. She doesn't feel well. And things commence from there. That's all I'll say as far as like the premise of the book goes. And so you know that something about the Abbey is off, and you see these kind of spooky, ghosty things happening. So I was enthralled. The first, 100 pages of this book, this is only about a 300-page book, so it's pretty short. But the first 100 pages, I was like, yeah, this is great. And then she starts making some decisions. And she's thought out or written to be this very self-sufficient, stubborn person, and this very independent person. And put in this scenario, she becomes someone else entirely. She starts making decisions because of a man. She starts doubting herself, and almost, some of the writing and the descriptions of her thought process of this specific love interest were very middle school. And some of the decisions that she was making were just dumb. And like, as she would write it out, you're like, I don't understand why you would make this mistake. Why you would think it was okay. Like, what in your line of, the character arc that she had, what in her background would have made her make these decisions? And she's described as like super stubborn, but then as soon as she has a little bit of resistance from anyone, she falters. And it was just so frustrating that I ended up DNFing this book. At one point in time, I started skimming. I think I started skimming around page 200. I got to 250. So I only had 50 pages left. I had skimmed 50 pages, but after skimming 50 pages and getting to page 250, I just didn't care anymore. I didn't care about the mystery because so many bad decisions had been made. I was literally, when I was skimming, I was just reading the dialogue. I would skip all of the other things and just go to the dialogue and see what was happening in the storyline through the characters talking to one another. And I just didn't care anymore. So if anyone knows what happens in Blackwood Library and would just like to give me a descriptor of, a summary of what happens and what the mystery was, I would love to know. But it was not worth my time to finish reading it. So it was kind of disappointing. I really thought I would love it. I usually love books about books. But yeah, I just couldn't get over the character making mistakes that I didn't think that she would make. So those are my highs and lows for the month of May and June. The next highs and lows video will probably be more typical, but I thought that talking about some new books along with this might help give us more to talk about. So let me know in the comments down below if you guys have any highs and lows from May and June that you are excited about and that I should check out, or if you have any exciting reads that you are reading in July, any TBR books that you are anticipating. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.